Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Chinnery. I'm here at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County, and I want to welcome you all to another one of our Lunch in the Garden programs here on Zoom. This is the second one of the series, and we're very happy that you're coming in and signing up. We got about 43 people so far. If you have any questions as we go along, why don't you type them in the chat box and we'll ask Will the questions at the end from the chat box. So that's a good way to communicate with us today. And next week, I'll put in a plug. We're going to have a really kind of off the wall speaker who's a little bit marching to his own drummer. It's going to be me. And I'm just preparing you because we're going to talk about alternatives to lawns. So there's a lot of people out there that look at all that grass that they mow and they go, wow, could I do something different with all this area? Maybe I don't want to have a lawn as big as I do. And next week, we're going to do sort of a survey class and look at the different things you can do besides mowing a lawn. So come back at noon next week. Some of you will get the reminder in the email. If you don't get the reminder, sign up on our website and you can catch the link there. It's under the events section. If you Google Cornell Cooperative Extension Rensselaer County, you'll get right to the website. Okay, so thanks again for coming in. Today our speaker is Will Stellar, who works for Robinson Nursery. And Robinson Nursery is a big wholesale nursery, and it's located out in the Pacific Northwest. And this is kind of an interesting talk because we don't often get to speak to the people that actually grow these plants and distribute them and market them. And Will lives in Rensselaer County, up in the northern part of the county, and he travels all over the country. He's a nursery rep from Maine to Virginia. Is that right?
That's correct.
So he's on the road a lot of times. He sees a lot of different problems with trees and shrubs. He knows a lot about the new varieties that are coming along. And he's going to tell us today about all of those things, as well as planting bare root trees and shrubs, which is kind of a way that you can do planting a little bit more cheaply, maybe, and get maybe better quality. But I'm going to let Will tell us all about that. So, Will, I'm going to let you share your screen.
All right. Thank you, David.
And thank you for being here.
Well, you're very welcome. Welcome, everybody who's here. And please, like David said, if you have any questions, type them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation here. You'll see some screens and I'll talk about the slides that you're going to see. Thank you. Okay. Let's see.
Okay, I can see it. That looks good.
Now I just got to go from the, whoop, I did it again, David. Hold on. Got to start it again is what I got to do.
Okay. It's a little bit like flying an airplane. There's a lot of controls here.
Whoops. All right, hold on. From beginning, right? And then I go back to you. Let's see. Sorry. Share. Nope. Okay. How did we do this before? Do you recall?
I would go to share screen first.
Okay.
Because it did share. We could see it.
Share screen. And let's see.
Yeah, for some reason it's not sharing.
I just don't see it there. Okay, hold on. I just need to bring it back up on my desktop. Sorry. I think that's what I did wrong because I took it off my desktop somehow. Okay, and then I press. Nope. Back here. What was the show?
Do you have the share screen, the green button down the bottom?
I do. Are you ready? I think
Yeah.
I got. Let's see, right here. And share. There we go.
Okay, here it comes. Oh, and there it is.
All right, so we got this.
Ready to go.
Thank you for your patience. So like David said, I'm basically a local bare root tree and shrub. I guess I'd call myself a professional. I've done it for 22 years. And today we're going to discuss the who, what, where, and why, and oh boy, the how of bare root tree and shrub production and how you as gardeners or lovers of horticulture can utilize bare root trees and shrubs in your gardens. Okay, we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of bare root planting, whether it be trees or shrubs. I'd love to delve into the propagation techniques for these items, so it kind of gives everybody an overall basic knowledge on how trees and shrubs are built or made. And then we'll go a little bit on how to plant and care for your bare root plantings, whether it be trees, shrubs, perennials, whatever that you're speaking of. Okay, so we'll pop right into this. Let's see. So what are bare root trees and shrubs? Some folks, hopefully, I think maybe y'all know when I say the word bare root, that means that the tree or shrub that you're going to plant has no soil connected to the root. And I know that sounds really weird or scary maybe to some, but it's been a long time horticultural practice to produce trees in a bare root form. It's how most production nurseries across this country and in many other countries in the world have always transplanted many different varieties and cultivars and put them in a production standpoint. When you're producing hundreds, if not thousands of trees, to remove those trees or transplant those trees with a soil ball or a soil mass connected to them would be tremendously labor intensive and very, very costly to do. And then plus you got to think about your soil removal and replacement when you're doing that kind of stuff. So this is a real effective, efficient way to produce trees and shrubs. All right, next slide here. So here's just a couple of pictures of some bare root tree production. If you have never planted a bare root tree or shrub, this is kind of where you're looking at a root mass. The one that's underneath the heading there looks like a really nice 360-degree kind of root mass for the shrub. The picture to the right on the bottom is a bundle of 5. So I don't want to make you confused and think that that's maybe a multi-stem tree or shrub. That's actually 5 trees, and that's how we bundle them. We tie the root masses together. We tie the tops of the trees together, and we ship them in that fashion. And the picture on the top is just basically a production greenhouse where either cuttings or most likely that would be softwood or hardwood cuttings, and that's basically how a lot of these trees are produced. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's just a picture of that as well. But again, just some folks have dabbled with bare root in mail order situations. You might not get as much root mass as you would with some of the places that I'll suggest at the end of this this meeting here. But I just wanted you to see a root system so you can kind of understand that there's no soil attached. All right, so that's in comparison to what most people are normally see at either a nursery that you go to locally, Troy's, Maple Lane Nursery, Fadigan's, where you might see a balled and burlap production, where the trees are actually harvested with some soil around the roots, or possibly container production where they're grown inside of a container. What I want everybody to realize is that all the trees that you're seeing in this fashion have come from a bare root source. So this is where the comfort and the ease that I want you guys to think about when it comes to bare root planting. This is how we start, is what we're talking about today. All the nurseries start with what we talk about today. So you can do it too. It's just a matter, the biggest challenge is to find the sourcing. And that's kind of a little bit of what I'm here to help with. I love this county and I love where I live, so I'm happy to share this kind of information with you guys. So picture to the left is a bunch of Amelanchier. Those are probably Autumn Splendor, if you're familiar with that one. And the tree to the right is a paperbark maple. That's an Acer Griseum. That's like a 4.5-inch caliper tree that I actually dug myself out of my yard and gave as a gift to someone. All right, so this slide here will give you some information. So millions of trees and shrubs are produced annually from production farms in the West Coast and other regions of the U.S. The Southeast does a lot of bare root production as well. Their trees are usually a little bit more juvenile than the trees that are produced in the West Coast. So just be wary of that if you do some wholesale sourcing or even some retail sourcing. It's awful hard to figure out where your trees are coming from. That's a really, really deep question to try to get into and get somebody to answer. But majority of the trees that are produced in this country are produced in the West Coast, whether it be the state of Oregon or Washington. So again, woody bare root trees and shrubs are the main source of woody plant material for nursery production in the U.S. They're used by major container producers, Monrovian Nurseries, Bailey Nurseries, White Flower Farm, any farms or any companies that you're used to seeing. A lot of your proven winners that in the white pots that you guys may be excited about when you get to your local nurseries. A lot of those come from production nurseries like where I work, where we produce them in a bare root fashion, and we give them to a container producer that puts them in a container. It grows them on for a while, then they wind up in a retail center, whether it be Fadigan's, a Home Depot, lots of different retail farms that produce trees and shrubs or having somebody grow them for them. So it all starts, like I said, with the bare root product. They're used by field producers for balled and burlap production. Locally, we have bigger places around here. Hannon Nursery LLC here in Hoosick Falls, where I'm from, is about 1,000-acre farm that produces primarily by field production of bare root liners. Mandy Spring Farm up in that's in Washington County, but it's up in Granville, New York. Maple Lane Nursery in Columbia County, that's in Felicia, New York. Again, big field producers that are using hundreds, if not thousands, of bare root liners for what they do. So they're also used. Bare root is also used for many reforestation projects and litigation projects. So there'll be bids that go out for a reforestation project or some sort of legal issue that happened, and a lot of times the legal firms will decide to use bare root because it's an easier transplant and an easier financial fix than it is to purchase balled and burlap trees of the same nature of what was either damaged or lost. So that's good for that. Now, when we talk about the bare root trees and shrubs, a question that a lot of people will ask is how old these trees and shrubs are. So these bare root trees and shrubs are usually about a 3 to 4 year old tree crop. The shrubs are usually a 1 to 2 year old crop. When that means that they've been in the ground for 3 to 4 years as a tree, they've been in the ground for 1 to 2 years as a shrub. That's all based on how they're propagated, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But basically, my point to this and to give you guys a little bit of insight is these crops that the company I work for and similar size companies, or there's a few larger than us, we have to do a 3 to 4 year prediction of what the market is going to be interested in. And then we have to plan that 3 to 4 year harvest based on what we think the sales are going to be. And with something that just happened like COVID, that's what we basically come down to is what I call a swag, like a scientific wild A-word guess. It's just, we try to have some science behind it. We try to get the numbers right for people and what the demand is and what people like. But sometimes we do miss tremendously, and the demand is pretty high for a certain item that we just don't have enough of to supply the country. So that's where when you get to your local garden center and you're looking for that one special thing, sometimes they're just not there.
Remember the swag.
Yes, remember the swag and forgive the producers for the swag. All right, so these bare root trees, the trees and shrubs are harvested in the late fall and the winter months in the West Coast. They don't have a tremendous, or really ever a frost out there, and their winters are very mild in Oregon. So during the muddy, wet, rainy winter season, these trees and shrubs are harvested with special machines that have shakers, arms that shake, and a lifting device that actually will lift the shrub or tree out of the ground underneath the roots. It'll lift it up, and then these shakers bang it apart where it knocks all the soil off the roots. And then all these trees and shrubs by the millions are collected into wagons and brought and stored in refrigerated cooler systems, or what we call design sawdust beds. They have a tremendous drainage system so that the roots don't stay too wet, but they stay covered and moist. That being very important, and I'm going to repeat this a couple of times in this talk, air to your root system is your worst enemy. Exposed air to your root system, drying out that root system will be your worst enemy. So any bare root items that you do purchase, whether it be online, whether you come to a tree sale somewhere and buy some bare root, the moisture and a wet root system until you get that planted is really, really crucial. Again, air is your worst enemy. So our coolers that we store these in sometimes are basically acreage. I worked for one company that had 11 acres of refrigerated coolers that these trees and shrubs are stored into. They're basically set at about 100% humidity and a temperature of usually varied between like 34 and 37 degrees. And they were kept that way from sometimes October all the way until June. Because sometimes we'll have some late May shipping that we do. The plants are still dormant. We can still keep them dormant in those coolers and they'll still wake up. Just the growing period when they get planted is much shorter. That's the only trouble on the wholesale end. We don't really like to ship that late, but sometimes things happen. So these trees and shrubs, when they're harvested, big orders are taken. They're shipped in refrigerated trucks all over North America during the early spring months. So right now I'm in the middle of our shipping season, which is a pretty intense deal. There's probably a couple $1 million of trees and shrubs moving across this country every week for me. So it's a lot of plant material, but the producers that you guys buy from, the retailers need it from their wholesale suppliers. The wholesalers need it from the production people like us out in Oregon. So it's a big part of the season. A lot of plants moving across this country right now that you look at a refrigerated truck and you might think that there's vegetables or something for the grocery store in it, but most likely it's bare root trees or shrubs. So, all right. And then I guess we're going to get into some of the propagation techniques that are used in order to make trees and shrubs or make bare root material. A couple of them, I'm going to give you some good diagrams here. I'll mention them quickly. There's budding. There's either the T-bud or a slice bud, and I'll show you some diagrams of that. There's grafting, which is different than budding. They're two separate different things. There's hardwood and softwood cuttings that are used to produce these items. We use seed, which of course produces seedlings. And then we use tissue culture as another scientific way that we can mass produce the trees and shrubs you guys love in a little bit quicker, more uniform fashion. All right, so first, before we get into some of that propagation, I want to talk about some of the advantages of bare root versus your typical balled and burlap purchase, or maybe your container purchase at a retail garden center or nursery. So the advantages of a bare root purchase, they're lighter to ship. So for us, we fit more on a truck, of course, and it makes shipping cost less from the West Coast to the East Coast. There's less weight, and that means we can fit more on a truck. When soil's involved coming from the West Coast to your retail outlets here in the East, the cost for them to receive containerized or B&B materials a lot more money. They don't fit anywhere near as much in the truck, and the truck itself is actually cost them more to have it shipped. So that's a huge advantage of bare root. There's less cost per plant. The plants are younger, so the value of the plant itself can't be tremendous. So there's less cost per plant for the same type of plant that you might want. If you're used to growing, let's just say a limelight hydrangea tree, and you go out to the local retail garden center and buy one in a container, you might know the price. They might be anywhere from I would guess $150 to maybe $199 based on the place that you're purchasing them from. So they've been grown a year at some sort of production facility somewhere in this country and then sold to that retail. And everybody needs to make their markup or piece of profit from the sale. I do get this, but with a bare root item, you're 1 year younger than what you're buying, and you're going to buy it for a third of the cost, maybe at the best. So the initial cost of that plant's a lot cheaper, or the cost to replace that plant if it does fail is a lot cheaper too. So landscapers, if you're out there, if you're listening, it might be a good way to have some more of the challenging plants be more cost effective when you do install them in the landscape. And the cost is very reasonable for a retail purchase. It's not a jaw dropper when you go to a bare root tree sale. Usually you get either more for what you were willing to spend, or you just don't spend as much, which is kind of neat. So ease of planning and transport. These things are all liftable by anyone from the age of 6 to probably 96. They're very light things to plant. So as far as a big bulky soil ball or a container to have to move around the yard and get near your hole in order to plant, you don't have to do that with these. Keep those roots moist while you're digging your hole. I suggest like a wet piece of burlap or a wet towel or wet paper or anything you could do. Just keep the root systems covered and moist. Do not let them dry out by air. And I'll keep repeating that. And basically you dig your hole, you'll get that near that hole, and then it's just you just pick it right up and put it in the hole and plant it. It's really easy. So equipment's not really needed as far as skid steers or backhoes or anything like that. So it's quite an advantage to use bare root trees in that light. Again, there's a lot of talk in horticulture or the industry about soil matching. Where if you plant something maybe in a container and it's grown in media versus soil, you're going to have a media versus your soil kind of transition, and they got to blend and match, and roots got to get used to going into native soils. So with a bare root tree or shrub, again, it's easy to modify that soil that transplant's going to go into. The hole's open. You're going to be backfilling with native soil for the most part. You can enhance that if you'd like to with some peat moss or anything, compost, anything that you kind of like to put in your soil to make the soil a little bit enhanced or better. But at the same time, that modification of the soil is easier to do with this bare root planting than it is with a root ball or a container tree. So the other part, as you're watching your bare root tree or shrub grow, you have more time to shape or grow the tree into what you want since it's more juvenile. There's going to be a beautiful shape formed by the nursery, whether it be the company I work for or any other company that produces these bare root. We try to produce a beautiful start with our liners with some alternate or opposite branching, whatever works the best for that species. But again, you get to control that as the horticulturalist in this line versus being forced to buy something that's been pruned for the last 3 to 4 years that maybe is a little not how you would prune it. Let's put it that way. Maybe you like it pruned a little bit more open. So this is kind of fun. You're basically growing your baby. So, all right. So we'll get into some disadvantages here. Disadvantages, usually bare root items are definitely a smaller start than a balled and burlap transplant or a containered transplant. The trunk caliper, I wrote truck, sorry. The trunk caliper is usually it's smaller than a B&B item or a container item because again they had a couple of more years of growing because they were started from the same things that you'd be starting with. So 1-inch trunk caliper is usually the largest that'll be available in most varieties or genuses when you go to a bare root tree sale or find a source of bare root material. It's really hard to find something larger than that. There's a few. If people are really interested, I could throw up a name that's, but again, it's mostly on a wholesale line that you would see something bigger. And again, it would be for more remediation plantings than it would be for somebody just receiving one to plant because the root systems of a 2-inch caliper tree get pretty wide and big, so they'd be hard to fit in a car or a pickup truck. A disadvantage of bare root, it's hard to locate uniform, consistent material on a regular basis. I put in here, use Burley Farm. There's a place, Burley Farm's a neighbor of mine here in the Hoosick Falls area. Fedco is up in Maine. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Fedco catalog. It's a beautiful catalog, and they supply wonderful bare root and bare root fruit trees, small fruit and bare root trees. Fedco has been a customer of mine for many, many years, and they do a wonderful job with their mail order of bare root. And then here we're blessed in Rensselaer County, the Soil and Water Conservation group has decided to reopen up the plants, the bare root plant sale that they used to have years back. It's been, I believe it's in its 3rd season this year back. It's here in Hoosick Falls. and it's got a lot of wind behind it. So I give you those 3 items there, and I will actually put something up at the end of this presentation for you guys to either you can use your phone to take a picture of or whatever, so that way you have dates and times and places to look. But we're actually a little blessed here in Rensselaer County to be able to have so much bare root available to us. So it's kind of neat. Another disadvantage, unfortunately, is they're sold in bundles of 5 and or 10 count bundles to the wholesale accounts. Again, the Rensselaer County Soil and Water Conservation, they will break up bundles, and Burley Farm will break up bundles as well. So we'll buy 5, we'll buy 10, we'll buy 15, and hopefully sell them in 1s and 2s and get rid of all of them. We don't have to require people to buy 5s or 10s. Fedco, I believe, actually sells in single units as well. But unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to call the company I work for out in Oregon and order things in single counts. And usually those bigger companies have pretty large minimum dollar orders as well. So I'd avoid calling out there, but again, don't hesitate to ask if there's places that, around, whether it be this county, other counties, or other states locally that might have some bare root sales going on. It's a little bit more popular than you think it is that people will sell bare root. It's a very nice, quick distribution of plant material in the spring when people are starting up their garden centers and nurseries or farm stores or anything like that. It's a real nice way to kind of welcome the spring season and get things going. So there's quite a few of them out there. So disadvantages, this one kind of is the same for anything really. I just put it in here just because it's something that should be addressed. Is you just probably can't pop a bare root tree or shrub in the ground and walk away. They need to be watered and watched through their first growing season. Watering requirements are no different than like a bald and burlap tree or a larger transplant. So that's where I was kind of torn about whether I should put this in here or not. It's not really a disadvantage. It's just they're we nurse these trees. We kind of nurse them, and we nurse them through this first season until they get their roots established. So it's kind of a thing that you really need to do with a bare root tree versus kind of just going back there a few months later and looking at it going, what the heck happened to this tree? So with that as well, I'll mention, I was talking to David earlier about this and a few other people actually in the last couple of days. So sometimes these trees and shrubs are stored, like I said, from October on. So what happens in that storage is what we call a natural sweating process, where the trees will acclimate themselves to different air and root temperatures, and they'll start to translocate their sugars and starches in the fashion for them to actually make buds awaken and leaves form. So that process can sometimes get stalled with a bare root item, because if you think of its nature, it's probably not collecting. When we harvest these, we're not collecting 100% of the roots. We get quite a bit. We get probably over 75% of the roots, but we don't get 100% of the roots. So the tree gets a little shocked from that. There might be some root hair damage. Some other items might tend to make this tree slow down a little bit. So what I would suggest to you is this caring or nursing of this tree or shrub that you plant is kind of crucial, in the sense that it might take a couple of weeks for it to break dormancy. It might take a month for it to break dormancy. Some species are more challenging than others. Hawthorn, Crataegus is one. Redbud, Cereus is another that take sometimes to wake up. So don't give up on them, but at the same time, nurse them along, and you'll find a point where they keep checking to see if there's green cambium underneath there, if the tissue's alive. But usually the plants will wake up. So, and then the last thing that I'll mention is a disadvantage. Some folks like to plant B&B. They'll pop them in the ground. That heavy root ball will keep that tree or shrub there pretty comfortably if planted correctly without much staking requirement. These, I would suggest staking a bare root tree until it anchors its root system. Probably just 1 season is all you'd ever need. But it's always a good windy day with a big leafed bare root tree, and you could see quite a bit of movement on one of these trees, which could cause a little bit of a problem. So staking is kind of a requirement. All right, we'll move on to, so we'll get into this propagation here that I was talking about. So I don't know if you've ever walked in production nurseries and looked around and saw trees and just wondered how they're made or why they're different. And so the first thing we talked about, I mentioned earlier about propagation techniques is budding. So there's two types of budding that are predominantly used to make. Um, now this is important for propagation to kind of think of it as in the repetition of an exact plant. Like let's just pick a plant, red maple, October glory. So for us to make, well, let's pick a different one. Acer saccharum, Acer sugar maple, Green Mountain. Okay, so if we want to make another Green Mountain sugar maple by the cultivar name, this is how we go about doing this. And we use either a T bud on the left-hand side or a slice bud. So basically what that means is we're going to take budwood from an orchard that we have, that we know that we have a very healthy, mature group of Green Mountain sugar maples. We collect just young juvenile stems off the tips of these, and then we take the buds from those and we slice those into regular sugar maple seedlings. So we'll grow the seedling for a year in a field, and then we'll go out and we'll actually, you'll see here in a slide that's coming up, we'll go out there with contracted, what we call contracted budders, and budders will put probably 5,000 of these buds onto 5,000 seedlings a day on a good day. So I just wanted to show you the diagram here. So the bud, that's actually one bud node of a leaf node of a sugar maple that'll get attached to a seedling. So picture that seedling only being really small, at the size of maybe a pencil, and the bud gets attached, it gets taped in place. The cambiums start to heal and fuse together. And then what comes from that bud will be a Green Mountain sugar maple. The rest of what's above that bud will get cut off with pruners. And you'll see that in the next couple of pictures, and I'll explain that as well. All right, so contract laborers can bud up to 5,000 trees a day on a good weather day. So the rootstocks are grown for a season prior to the budding. Okay, the scion or budwood is selected by a foreman to match the size of the rootstock. So they pick about 15 to 20 buds on a scion tree. They'll cut the stems off and bring those budwood to the field, cut those buds off very carefully, one by one, and stick them onto the seedlings. And our industry has not developed any other techniques for this manual budding that has to happen. It's a beautiful, beautiful horticultural technique, and it's unfortunate that if we lose it someday, or if the knowledge, I don't think the knowledge will get lost, because the knowledge has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's just whether we can sustain labor to make sure that it still happens. But the majority of selected cultivar shade and ornamental trees are all propagated by budding. Thousands and thousands, if not millions of them in the fields every year. So this picture here is a picture of a budder and a budding cart that the budders build these themselves. We give them the metal and the tools and the welder and somebody who can weld in order to design these themselves. But the budding cart provides them shade. So they basically will roll on a platform all day long, and we'll put one bud on each one of those seedlings. This, it looks like to me, is a crabapple group. So basically this would be like a crabapple seedling of some sort, whether it be Malus Columbia or something like that. And maybe he's putting spring snow crabapple buds on every one of those down at the base. And basically you could look at that field and say that's a lot of work. I guess if you can't say that's a lot of work, then I mean you've worked harder than people on the planet Earth, because this is pretty labor intensive. But that's how each and every one of these trees is made, whether it be a shade tree or an ornamental. And we'll probably have maybe 4 to 6 budding groups budding on a good day every day. They get paid a very fair wage, and then they also get paid by at the end of the year, when we look at the bud take total, where the buds either took or they didn't take. If we have over 80% take in a particular crop, whether it be like, say, spring snow crab apples, well, we got an 87% bud take. Every budder gets a bonus based on the bud take. So it's to their advantage to make the buds the right size, the taping done the right way, so that way they can receive a bonus as on top of their pay scale already. So and again, a lot of these budders have worked for many of these companies out in Oregon for honestly 30 to 40 plus years, some of them. So it's going to be interesting here in the future to see how we can proceed. So there's so when you bud a tree, the area that you bud it to is called a bud union area, or the bud union. And I wanted to point this out in this picture here. A lot of folks will see something like the picture where it says bad, and then there's a picture that says good. Both of those areas are a bud union. And what has happened in the bad picture is the top, like I told you, was going to get cut off, where the bud turns into Green Mountain sugar maple. And then there's a piece that's above that. That piece got cut off, unfortunately, much, much too late. So the compartmentalization and the healing around that cut is not very effective, where on the good picture, it's very clean and very effective. And that's what we hope for, is to have really good, clean bud unions like that when we do our budding. So the picture to the left, the silhouette of the tree, just kind of shows you where a bud union or a graft union would be based on soil level. And it points out the fact that there's a rootstock underneath. That's very important in for root flare. When people talk about root flare, if there's a rootstock underneath and the tree's been budded, that root, a lot of people will consider the union, the bud union, the flare, and that's really technically not the flare. The flare is a little bit further down. So that's bud union identification there. All right. So grafting is another type of propagation we do. Grafting is kind of neat because you got to prepare the rootstock for the graft. So instead of the budding where we let it keep growing and photosynthesizing and all that stuff, we actually will cut the rootstock a certain way, and then we prepare the budwood or the scion wood as well in order to match them in a cambium layer form that kind of touches in a lot of places. So the cambium of both the rootstock and the scion are touching in multiple places. And the important part about grafting is you need what they call graft compatibility. The thing you're grafting to needs to be compatible to what you're grafting onto it. So we can't graft sugar maples onto crab apples. It has to be species matching, sorta, to a point. There's exceptions, but there's not many. So, and that's grafting. So maybe a lot of people maybe have been in a gardening program or gone to a garden center and they've done some grafting, bench grafting with you, where they have a little machine that'll cut the rootstock and the scion in a certain way, and then you fit them together and you tape them up, and in a few weeks or a few months you have the trees doing fine, and you're like, wow, that's kind of neat, I did that. But this is grafting, and grafting is kind of a really fun thing to do as well. Here's a good picture here with the graft union and the wrap. So I'm trying to think of the name of the machine I have. It's called the Top Grafter, I believe. It's an actual physical metal machine that'll fit maybe a pencil size or a little bit bigger rootstock or scion in there, and you can move it in different directions and actually make these cuts, these really clean cuts mechanically, and then the pieces fit together really well. So you just need to match up the diameter of the scion wood with the rootstock, and then usually you have some pretty good success as long as the plants are compatible with each other. So this is how a lot of people will graft apples for orchards. They do bench grafting, or they'll do field grafting as well, where they'll just graft them in the field this way and wrap them. Apples are really easy to do this way, production apples. So, but grafting's fun. Then we go into hard and softwood cuttings. So certain genus groups lend themselves better to either method. So these are directly stuck into a media, whether it be like perlite or what else do we use sometimes? Soil medias, different types of soil medias, but basically we're going to take soft tissue cuttings with a few leaf nodes, and we basically dip the tips of these into some rooting hormone, put this into the soil, which basically it's a full, maybe a 200-foot greenhouse, 50 feet wide. The whole base of that greenhouse is full of soil. with little walkways in between it. And like I showed you in that earlier picture, we stick hundreds of thousands of these. Red maples are done this way. Acer rubrum, October Glory, the autumn blaze maples done this way with softwood cuttings. And basically, once that's rooted, then we basically know we have, because it's came from a autumn blaze maple, this cutting, we know we have an autumn blaze maple again. And then we stick that autumn blaze maple out into a field production situation, and we start to grow it from that. And we can produce really high mass numbers very quickly with soft and hardwood cuttings versus budding or grafting. So this is one of the more popular ways to grow some of the easier genuses that grow very well this way. Salix is another one. Willows will grow very quick this way. Maybe some folks have taken a willow branch and stuck it in some wet ground, and all of a sudden you have another willow tree. Same kind of idea. That's the softwood cutting. Hardwood cuttings, they're just there's certain genuses that require that you take older wood than the younger wood. The older wood works better hormonally in order to produce roots with the rooting hormone. I just wanted to show you a picture on how you would take a cutting here. And again, all this could be available from David if people ask or something like that. By all means, I'm happy to let them have a picture of this or whatever. I mean, maybe they're taking pictures themselves, whatever. But if people ask you, David, that diagram, I wish I had that diagram about the length and the slope and all that kind of stuff. It's all available to you. Okay. So yeah, this is again just some genuses lend themselves better to harder wood, older wood on the plant in order to make the cutting, but the process is still very similar. All right. Last but not least, tissue culture. This is kind of the new cool science of the horticulture world. It's not brand new. They've been doing tissue culture for many, many years. It's just one of the companies I work for. We built our own tissue culture lab and kind of used this technique to increase some production pretty quickly, and it was kind of neat. So you're basically taking tissue from the plant, dividing it up, using an agar mix of a hormone that'll produce either roots first or shoots first, and then transplanting it from that jar into another jar, which is a different type of hormonal thing that'll actually produce either the roots or the shoots, whichever you started with the first time. And basically then you're getting little tiny plantlets that you can put in a greenhouse and grow for a little bit longer, and then you can transplant those right out into the field. It's kind of a really, really neat way to get lots of plants really quickly. So and when I say quickly, we're talking about a season's long deal, not weeks or anything like that. It's not any faster. It's just production wise, once you get some tissue culture started, the division and using people to divide and make 50 count, 50 count, 50 count, 50 count, it adds up really quickly versus budding or stuck cuttings or anything like that. Here's another picture. So it's all done in laboratories, vented hoods. These are reverse vented hoods. All pathogens or diseases have to be kind of minimized at this because it can make your tissue culture crop fail very quickly. But if you needed to produce a certain cultivar and there was a tissue culture agar mix known to the tissue culture world, because they have their own kind of brews and concoctions that they make that are very definitely not shared between tissue culture labs. I mean, they're very they're worth quite a bit of money to certain people to know the formula. But once the formula is known, you could go from 10 plants to 10,000 plants in maybe a season or two, which is kind of great to be able to do that kind of division. So the labs are very expensive to build. The training of the employees to do the work in the labs is definitely more complicated, but much kind of more interesting, maybe much more interesting, or I would say better work environment than budding. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like my back would feel better if I did this maybe all day than laying on a cart. I'm not sure, but again, there's all sorts of different ways we produce these trees and shrubs. So that's the important part to take out of this. Seedling production. So some things, oaks, for example, these are Aesculus. These are horse chestnut. Produced from seedlings only. We basically collect seed. The companies buy seed from people who collect or across the country, and we plant lots and lots and lots of acorns or or Esculus seedlings in order to produce the trees that we need. So again, it's not the worst labor intensive part of it, but again, to collect the seed and have a reliable source of seed, that gets complicated sometimes. And if you're not the right size company, or maybe they have a bust, oak stand really didn't produce many acorns in the central part of Pennsylvania where they come from or something, then all of a sudden everybody's short, and now you're short as a big producer as well. So but seedling production is kind of part of it as well. Some things can only be grown by seed. It's the slowest process of all the processes that I've described. All right, so again, this is kind of just gives you some more pictures of the root systems, gives you an idea of some in a wheelbarrow, so you can kind of see like what you're dealing with size-wise. The picture to the left, you can see a really kind of funky bud union there, if you notice that from our talk. And then I put, that's the Burley Farm Store, and there's some bundles of trees next to a full-size pickup truck, and I figured I just wanted to show you that that's the kind of bare root tree material that are offered at these tree sales that are going to be coming up here. So they're not tiny is what I guess I'm getting at. They're decent sized material. Anything that is listed as a 6-foot branched is really probably 6 to 9 feet tall with branching. That's what the branched part stands for. There's listings that'll say light branched, which means it just doesn't have as many branches. But branching usually consists of 5 to 7 branches. Light branching is 3 to 5 branches. Whips can be from 0 to 3 branches. So depending on how you buy your bare root from somebody, that's kind of some of the descriptive terms you could use to describe what you might be purchasing. But again, a lot of them are based on height until it gets to 1-inch caliper, and then usually they're listed as 1-inch bare roots or 1.25-inch bare roots. Sometimes items come in 1.25-inch size as well. But all right, so there's that picture. This is what you need to do when you either buy or pick up bare root trees or shrubs from anywhere you purchase them from. So again, I'll repeat this for the 3rd or 4th or 5th time. Keep those root systems moist, not standing water. You don't want to drown them, but you don't want to let them dry out. Continued exposure to air is your worst enemy. So what you can do is heal the plants into a mulch type product. If you're unable to plant within that first week, maybe some good heavy straw. And straw is my least favorite, but a good heavy straw. I use compost here at the house. I heal it right into soil sometimes, like a loose soil or a potting soil. Just keep as much air away from the roots as you can, and let that natural moisture of the items that you heal it in with keep the root systems moist. That's the kind of the secret to this. When you're planting, when you get your trees, if you see any broken or diseased looking or icky looking root material, maybe something with we tend to get a lot of gray mold from the storage, so there might be some gray mold on a broken root that's hanging. Go ahead right and cut that right off. It's the same as if we were digging it out in Oregon and shaking it. It's sometimes these processes happen, so you cut that little bit of broken or diseased material off, and that helps the tree heal a little bit quicker. When you put it in the hole, you water newly backfilled plantings like thoroughly 3 or 4 times in the first couple of weeks, like a really good soaking, so you kind of can take all the excess macropores and air away from that root system. Again, air is your worst enemy. So if you have big open gaping macropores in your planting hole, that could really do some ill will to a bare root tree or shrub. And then plan, like I said, to stake your tree if you have a windy location. Some trees lend themselves, once you water them in a couple of times, they feel really stiff and solid, then you could probably walk away from that. But if you do stake your tree, just do it opposite your primary wind direction, your normal west winds, just try to get it the other side. Root development, this is why bare root trees get planted in the spring. The spring gives you the spring, the summer, and the fall for 2 periods of time where the plant will produce more roots than it will shoots. So you want that root establishment to happen for that plant to have the most success. If you're going to fertilize in the spring, you fertilize with fertilizers high in potash or potassium, bone meal, blood meal, anything that says blossom booster. when you're talking about your NPKs, I used to use triple superphosphate when I could find it, and that was always a good root promoter to get these plants established a little bit quicker. That was in field production out in back in my younger days. So, all right, so that's kind of what you do when you get your material. Here's a little bit of a what I call planting circle for bare root. So you heal you don't let your tree shrub die out. Start at 12 o'clock. It's like a clock. Go clockwise. Heal your tree and shrub in if you're unavailable to plant it right away. When planting, prune off any of those diseased dead roots and stems. Water newly backfield planting hole thoroughly 3 to 4 times in the first couple of weeks. Plant the stake trees and think root development. Don't be ultimately super duper concerned about the leaf development. It happens. They will break dormancy. They will make leaves. They need to make leaves. If they don't make leaves, you have a problem. But it takes some time sometimes for them to make leaves. But they're always going to be making roots, especially when the soil temperatures are cooler. They're going to be making roots. So the spring and, like I said, the fall are kind of really important times for you to think about the fertilization of some sort of root promoting fertilizer. So again, don't ultimately concern about the leaves. The leaves make energy, and I get it, and they make starch, and the whole process of photosynthesis, I get it. But root development is so crucial for these bare root trees and shrubs. All right, so here's a typical bare root planting diagram. This would be something that you see on like a landscape architect's map if they had spec landscape, on a design if they did spec bare root planting. So this happens to be a fruit tree. So the graft, they wanted a certain type above the ground, but this just gives you an idea that graft union or bud union needs to be above the depth. Do not try to plant that below. What happens if you plant it below is you're going to get most likely a sucker or a shoot that comes off of that rootstock. That's basically whatever that rootstock is. So you'll have 2 different trees growing. So just be careful of that. Keep that above. This is just a good one to take a picture of if you've never planted a bare root tree. This is a great diagram. So the hole is wider than it is deep. It is deep enough to receive the whole root system of the bare root tree, so you don't have to kind of shoehorn it in there. It gives you an idea of some mulching and the staking. So it's just a great diagram to use for planting, whether it be a fruit tree, shade tree, or an ornamental tree. Again, here's some.
So Will, we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, yep. I'll just quickly. I think I only have a few more slides. So,
okay.
These again, just more if you wanted to take pictures. Just shows you incorrect depth, correct depth, that kind of idea. Planting hole stuff. So the one on the left, I just wanted to point up the soil berm. This is something I always call a dog bowl. I like to make a big soil berm around everything I plant, so that way when I do water, it stays in the root system area and keeps that area moist. It doesn't run off. All right, and then here's a couple just pictures of planting holes. This one just to show you the size of the hole for the root system that's involved, to give you an idea of what you're going to do and not try to shoehorn or force the tree into a small hole. They get wider than deeper. Spend your time on the width more than the depth. Here's a picture of a shovel, just to give you an idea of where you'd want to be with that graft union. Again, another root system. They come in all different, every genus and species has a different kind of root look or size. So I can't promise that you won't have to dig a bigger or smaller hole, but they just need to be a fair hole. Give the tree a chance or shrub a chance. Multi-planting hole. Leaf litter, compost, organic matter, sometimes I use as mulch as well, but mulching will keep the root system cooler, which will help you develop more root longer before the summer takes over, where maybe less root development's happening because of the soil temperatures. I think ideally, if I remember right, I think like 42 degrees to 50 something degrees is ideal for root promotion, root making, and then after that, it kind of slows down quite a bit. Staking your tree, again, this is all available to you. If you need a picture, we can always email you one of these slides from this presentation. But old garden hose is great for wrapping around a trunk so you don't scar up the tree or damage the tree's trunk. Okay. So what else we got? Oh, all right. And yeah, I think that's about it. So we're going to open this up to some questions, but I wanted to leave this up on the screen for a while here. These are the two locations here in the county that you could purchase bare root trees this spring. Burley Farm is one of them. We call it the neighborhood bare root tree sale. So if you go to the website, you'll read all about it. You can read about Burley Farm, but that the code there, the will actually, if you click on that code with your phone, you'll actually pull up the inventory as well of what we're selling. And then the other one is the Rensselaer County Soil and Water Conservation. Their sale is absolutely amazing. And so they take the orders at the Square site where you can actually pre-order online and just come pick your stuff up. And the dates are all there for the pickup dates. To Hoosick Falls Ice Skating Rink. Everything's kept in a nice shady ice skating rink, healed in and bark chips around the rink, and everybody's orders are there. So basically, you just come and pick up your order. But they do have quite a bit of selection if you're looking through that list there of things that you could purchase. And the size of these material is probably going to shock some people for the prices that you're paying. They're pretty valuable, pretty inexpensive is what I'm saying. But the size of the plants are pretty impressive. So hopefully that gives you a good idea about bare root plantings and not to be scared of them. And again, always ask your county help here if there's any things we can always assist with. I'm sure we're happy to help. David, go ahead and open her up for questions if there's any out there.
All right, that sounds good. So if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat. I want to say thank you very much to Will. This talk took me back to my graduate school days when I was doing a research project at a nursery in Ohio. So that was pretty cool. I like all of that technique that you talked about, how people do these sorts of things. It's really interesting. Somebody said, where is Rensselaer County? Meaning what state? Oh my goodness. Well, we are in upstate New York. We are north of Albany and we touch Vermont and Massachusetts. So it's a beautiful part of the world. Come and visit.
Yeah.
I understand about keeping roots moist, though some directions I've received about planting bare root is soaking them in a bucket of water
Yeah.
starting the day before planting. Is this
That's
not correct or am I drowning them?
no, that's perfectly fine, and you're not drowning them. We're just speaking of weeks and or days in standing water is probably not the best idea. It probably doesn't hurt them, but it's probably not the best idea. But for a solid day, what that does is, especially with birches, it's a really great idea because it lets the plant refurbish any water that is lost through transpiration through the through its gas exchange units on its stems. Lenticels, they're called. So birch trees have lots of little lenticels all over the stems, and the plants will actually lose water as they're stored because they can't stop that gas exchange. And part of that gas is the water that's inside the plant. So for you to store those in a bucket of water for a day, the plant actually will uptake those and replenish that water loss that maybe those lenticels gave out. So it's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, Ellen said it was fascinating. Thank you. Excellent presentation. Lots of good information. One question I had was, do you ever use hydrogel anymore to put on the roots? I know Schichtel's was doing that.
Yeah, so that is a very common practice when you're doing uh, multiple plantings of thousands and thousands of trees. I've been involved with the hydrogel plantings at Schichtel's, and it's kind of a great process. So it's a little overkill if you're planting one or two trees, in my opinion, but it will not hurt at all. Hydrogel is a product that'll just keep the root systems moister while they establish themselves in the ground. So it's really not a bad idea at all.
Let's see. And for grafting, when you are attaching a bud to the seedling, is the seedling the same cultivar as the bud?
So most of the time, no, it can be. That is it's just another way to produce a tree, guaranteeing that it's going to be the same variety. But most likely, it's more of Haley. It's more of if it's a red maple, for example, Acer rubrum, you would put October Glory buds on a Acer rubrum seedling, or a Green Mountain sugar maple bud on a sugar maple seedling, not a Green Mountain seedling. But sometimes you could put them on a sugar Green Mountain seedling, but they don't really. We're not really producing seedlings from anything but really native sources. So a lot of times the understock is a native.
Yeah, the idea of the buds is that you can have one valuable plant of the
Mhm.
cultivar, and then you're going to bud it onto 50 of the run-of-the-mill
Yeah,
species, right?
correct.
So
Yeah,
we're propagating that very desired variety or cultivar.
correct. And how we do that is we collect. We have a scion orchard where we actually have mature, trees that are probably 40 years old that are only, believe it or not, maybe 15 feet tall that basically just produce what we call water sprouts or suckers. And then we just basically collect all those buds off of those suckers consistently year after year. We know that those buds are going to be the right size as long as our seedlings are where they should be. So size
And,
wise.
and you have to collect the budwood when it's dormant.
Correct.
Yes, so that would be in the fall, like November, December?
August, believe it or not.
Oh,
Is
August.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when the beginning starts out there. So the juvenility of that bud is really important as well for the budding process. And the buds, usually it's late July. No, beginning of August would be a better date. But they take the juvenility of those buds that are starting to form for the next year underneath the leaves
Hmm.
that are present, and those are the really good buds. The juvenile buds are better than older buds.
I didn't realize that happened so early.
Yep.
I always thought that the leaves fell off and then you took them.
No, they actually strip the leaves off and take the buds. Yep.
Wow. So, when you really think about this whole process, anyways, of these techniques, it's pretty labor intensive.
Very, very labor intensive. And um, I just think of other industries in this country that are maybe not this labor intensive. So I don't know. Doing this for as many years as I have, it's kind of interesting to see where this industry will lend itself in 20, 30 years down the road. I know it's so important for us to have green material and plants and trees in our lives as human beings. So it's kind of important that this gets carried on. So hopefully we'll figure out either a mechanical way to do it or people just won't stop doing it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not like growing corn.
it is not. Nope.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of complex stuff to produce a tree,
correct.
you know? So it really is fascinating. I thank you, Will, because this is like an insight into sort of a world that most people don't really have any knowledge of. I mean, we all
Correct.
go to the garden center and we buy trees and shrubs, but we don't really know all the background. So
Yeah,
that's
this
really
is
cool.
this is a really fun, more inexpensive way, like you described in the beginning, to really satisfy your horticultural bug too, is to really you can buy things this way and plant them and be like, oh my gosh, I'm growing this and I never thought I could grow it. And it was worth it because you didn't have to spend $700 to do it, that kind of idea. So
Right, right. Tell us a little bit more about Burley Farm. What do they do there?
Burley Farm is a wonderful organic dairy farm that started out as a farm store by distributing her homemade organic cheese. She makes the most wonderful, wonderful cheeses at the farm, and her and I have become friends through the years. And she built a beautiful, beautiful farm store now that supplies the our local neighborhood. I mean, it's a wonderful place to have right in your country kind of neighborhood, and so we go there for meats and cheeses and all sorts of great things like that. And her and I got talking about these trees, and I didn't realize how much of a passionate person she was about trees and shrubs. And all of a sudden, this blossomed into a great soft opening for her store every year, where she loves to have her trees get received here from the companies that supply her. They'll be healed in. We're going to do a little bit of a demonstration and talk during the days of the pickup of when people purchase their trees and pick them up. So there'll be a couple of half an hour talks during that day. So it's kind of a fun opening weekend.
And when will that be?
I believe it's April 7th. No, April 11th. What did I say?
Okay,
Let
coming
me
up soon.
Yes, it is quickly. So let me
All
just look
right.
at the date, David. So we have another question there too. Yeah. So the 12th, 13th, and 14th is when that is at Burley Farm.
If a crab tree has suckers due to too much mulch, can mulch be pulled back now to stop the suckers?
Um, Yes, pull back the mulch, but you're gonna unfortunately have to cut back the suckers as well. That's the only real way to get rid of those is to cut them back. But again, the mulch has let that understock, the root system of that tree, whatever it is, decide to put up some new growth. That's what suckering is. So,
Cut them off.
yeah, cut them off.
Well, thank you again, Will. This was really cool. I like supporting local agriculture, so that's pretty neat that we get to do that as well. And it won't hurt the root system of the plant, no. So you don't have to worry about that. And
Right.
yeah, and then the soil and water conservation folks, they're putting on a great sale too. So check those out, everybody. And thank you again, Will.
You're very
Um,
welcome.
and thank you, everybody, for being here today. We do eventually have plans to post these recordings on our YouTube channel.